morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm thrilled to be with you all today. My name is Natasha Turok. I am CNBC's Middle East correspondent, based right up the road in Dubai. I'm thrilled to be here at Investopia with my terrific panel of speakers, and today we will be talking about the global trends shaping the new economy. I'd like to introduce our fantastic stage of speakers. We have Professor François Bourguignon. He is Professor of Economics at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and the Paris School of Economics, and also Mr. Mark Antaki, Deputy Chief Strategy and Risk Officer at Mubadala. Now, unfortunately, our third panelist, Eric Robertson from Standard Chartered, is not able to join us as of now, but we're going to kick off the discussion, and I want to start with something that's been in the news quite a lot recently, the Trump tariffs. Now, it does feel like every couple of days we get hit with new news of tariffs, and as of yesterday, it seems that Trump will be going ahead with the tariffs on Mexico and Canada. There are now additional trade restrictions that are set to be imposed on China. I'd like to begin by asking Professor Bourguignon, you have a long and storied history of writing about trade and deglobalization and such related topics, and I want to ask you, and then I want to ask Mark as well for his thoughts. What do you see as the gravest near-term and long-term risks for markets? And also, could these actions end up destroying the US dollar's hegemony?
Okay, first, let me thank the organizers of this conference for being here today and to believe or to think that I have interesting things to say. The point is really that we are in a very particular point of time in the global trends. I mean, you were talking about, initially the idea was really to try to figure out what are the global trends today, but we are in front of disruptions, which may be major disruptions. We don't know yet exactly what will happen with the tariffs, but it is certainly extremely difficult to say anything about what will happen, what is likely to happen in the coming months or the coming years, possibly. But I would like to maybe first say something about the tariffs. This is something on which economists for a very long time have been working. We have theoretical models which are telling us something about what tariffs do. And what is interesting is the fact that the basic model basically says that a tariff is a bad thing. A tariff is reducing the total welfare of the economy, which is deciding about imposing or setting tariffs, except in a few cases, except in the case of a big economy, which, where it may be thought that because the size of that economy, the global economy, is so big that the tariff will contribute to lower the import prices. Then this is a way this big economy is able to influence global prices and take benefit from this. But when the economy is subject to many distortions, unemployment, deindustrialization, and this kind of thing, tariffs may be important in the sense that they can possibly correct for those distortions in the economy. And you may remember that the 2018 and 2019 tariffs in the US were justified in part to fix the issue of employment in many areas in the US. So this is what is making the analysis of tariff difficult. It is the fact that we have to take into account all those distortions, and it is not clear that what the impact will actually be. So the only thing we can do is look ex post to what happened. And you can guess that there has been a lot of studies about the impact of the 2018 tariffs, and the results are a bit surprising. The results say no change in import prices. So the advantage of a big economy were not exploited with these tariffs. Two, did we see any change in employment? The answer to that is no, not really. At the local level, some people have made very careful studies. The sectors which were most impacted by the tariff didn't show any more dynamism in employment. But what was observed, and this is interesting in connection with what we may expect for tomorrow, what was observed is that retaliation by other countries, by partner countries, were important. In particular, retaliation through tariff on agricultural products by Europeans and by Chinese had definitely an impact, a negative impact, of course, on the US economy. So this is interesting in the sense, now the impact was not that big, but what is interesting in that case is that the benefits that were expected from these tariffs were not really there. The negative impact of retaliation that could be expected from this tariff were there, even though retaliation was still quite modest. And this is the kind of lesson that we can get from this experience. So is it the case that this will be repeated tomorrow? Tomorrow, or already today, as a matter of fact, or yesterday, we know that tariff will be much bigger, much higher than in 2018. Much higher and broader in the sense that they will be covering many more sectors and they will be addressing specific countries. So this is a change. But at the same time, we know, or we have heard, that retaliation will be there, which means that truly we will be getting into an intense tariff war, which, as a matter of fact, we know that whatever the situations of the various countries, we know that the war necessarily will be reducing the welfare of all belligerents. And then from that point of view, I think that we may be rather pessimistic about what will happen, at least in the short run, if the policy, the tariff policy, is maintained, and if indeed retaliation is taking place as it has been announced by most partner countries of the US. So this is definitely changing the view that we may have on what will happen in the next couple of months, in the next year. This will have an impact in many areas. It will have an impact on inflation. It will have an impact on, as you said, on exchange rates. Definitely yes, even though we know that the tariff is impacting the exchange rate of the tariff-setting country, but when you have retaliation by big partners, it is the case that this exchange rate impact is neutralized but by what the partners are doing. So from this point of view, I don't think, to answer the question, that we cannot expect very, very much on the exchange rate front in the coming months. But probably I've been too long, so let me stop here.
No. It's fascinating and very much appreciate all of this insight. And Mark, I'd like to know your thoughts from the perspective of a long-term investor and the work that you do at Mubadala. How do you see this affecting the investment decisions that you're making?
Thank you. Very good morning to everybody. Professor Francois mentioned two things that resonated. We live in an uncertain world, and the tariffs is not a new phenomenon. It's been playing out for quite a while. As a matter of fact, there's been much more protectionist measures over the past 5 to 10 years than liberalizing measures. What that means, and it's not only because of tariffs, there's a specific theme that has been playing out over the past 10 years, which is the shifts in supply chains. We've been moving from a Kaizen world to supply chains that are different, that are more resilient. The themes of nearshoring, reshoring, regional supply chains, driven by tariffs, but also driven by what we saw with COVID, with the different wars that happened. So that's, from a business standpoint, a very interesting theme where businesses are repositioning themselves to be closer to their customers, to their markets, to be more personalized, to be better, more effective, more efficient. And this is certainly something that creates a lot of opportunities.
Now, I am I've got some good news. Eric Robertson is able to join us, our third panelist, and I believe he is going to join us any moment. But when you're ready, Eric, we are looking forward to welcoming you on the stage. And to move to the next topic, I was recently, a few weeks ago, in Saudi Arabia at the Future Minerals Forum, and the Saudi energy minister said something very interesting. He said that oil is no longer the security challenge that the world is going to face. It's in fact critical minerals, whether this is for the energy transition or for chips powering the increasing need for electricity for the data centers, for artificial intelligence, demand for which is booming across the world. How do you foresee, I'll start with you, Mark, how does this resource war play out, and how does a country best mitigate the challenges that's going to come with that, and the risks that it could face, that countries can face if they are not adequately prepared when it comes to resource allocation?
So let's put the resources a bit in perspective. There's a couple of mega trends that are driving the world. AI, and by AI we all hear the transformation that's happening. Just a couple of data points. AI needs a lot of data centers, 7,000 new data centers that need to be powered. You have the chips that need a lot of critical minerals. You have a huge transformation that the world is undergoing, the energy transition, where you have clean energy that needs a lot of minerals. You have the electric vehicles that need a lot of minerals. A couple of facts. So to be able to scale AI, clean energy, electric vehicles, we're going to need 2 times more lithium, cobalt, copper over the next 10 years. This is a big challenge because a lot of these are in specific regions. A lot of these need to be accessed, need to be distributed, and the resource is finite. The minerals is not only the only constraint. The energy that you mentioned, to power the data centers, you're going to need 7,000 terawatt hours to power them, not only the data centers and the electrification of the industry. What does 7,000 terawatt hour mean? It's the annual consumption of the US and Europe today. And that has to happen over the next 10 years. So the sheer magnitude of the demand that that transforming world requires is massive. Now, naturally, to your point, it creates on the geopolitical front that the challenges, the tensions, the positioning, but for the business, for the investors, this is also a big challenge because we need to access the resources, we need to build the businesses that can navigate in that environment, but with that challenge comes also a lot of opportunities. And here is what we do in that landscape and environment. Number one, we double down on what we think is right, doing it responsibly, investing for purpose and investing in a responsible way. That resource scarcity is a shared wealth, and we need to manage it in a proper way. Number two, for an investor, diversification is extremely important. And being able to navigate that global, fragmented, uncertain world, diversification becomes very, very important. Number three, and more importantly, we cannot do it alone. And to be able to navigate that world, partnership is what matters most. Partnering with like-minded investors, with like-minded GPs, with the business, with the innovators, to be able to build great businesses that deliver on the number four. All of these challenges need solutions, and being able to bring real solutions to real problems that the whole world faces. These are very much the four ingredients that constitute a bit the way Mubadala functions in every investment it does.
Thank you. And Francois, do you have any thoughts on?
No, I mean, what we just heard is very nice.
And I'm not sure that I have very much to add to that, except that I was very pleased to hear that the word responsibility being used, because we could not forget that at the same time as we have all the problems, all this evolution that we know, we have the huge constraint on the environment, the huge constraint on climate change, and this is absolutely crucial. So today we see that to respond, to address the issue of the additional energy that is needed to have AI being fully exploited in the coming 10 years, we know that there is a very much emphasis these days on nuclear energy. In all countries, there is suddenly, after many years of some passiveness in this area, suddenly we see, especially because of the new technology of the small nuclear reactors, there is a kind of multiplication of this. So this is at the same time a good thing, because this is saving on CO2 emission, but at the same time, the multiplication of nuclear reactors is problematic in the sense that the problem of what is the residuals of the fission is the problem is not completely solved. So we are creating a future problem on which we have no solution for the moment. But it is, from my point of view, absolutely essential to keep in mind this constraint which is bearing on everybody in the planet, and it is not clear that we are doing enough these days on this.
And I also wanted to ask about how you see the future of human employment. I mean, me personally, in the field of journalism, I do get a little nervous sometimes about the impacts of AI long-term on my industry. And you know, if you look back at major economic and industrial shifts over the last century or few centuries, these huge upheavals displace an enormous amount of workers. I mean, you look at the industrial shifts in the 1970s and 80s in America. You know, the Rust Belt used to be the beating heart of America's industry. And now, all of these major Rust Belt cities like Pittsburgh or like Cleveland, you know, many of them have fallen victim to crime, to poverty, to a large amount of brain drain, because the industrial sectors were replaced with automation and outsourcing to Asia. Do you see a similar scale of upheaval with AI? Because there's a lot of, obviously, optimism about what AI can do for the world, how it can change the technology, the advancements, how it can help humankind. But at the same time, I can't help but worry, not just in the West, but in the developing world as a whole. You have enormous sectors that provide crucial employment. And what happens when those sectors become dominated by AI and you simply don't need to hire as many of these people? What happens to stability? I mean, whoever wants to go first. No.
All right, so AI and human capital and development certainly intertwined, and certainly AI will have a very big impact on the skill set and human capital. Couple of data points. And again, this is very early because nobody is really able to identify and really measure, but the latest is it's going to affect, in the near term, probably around 100 million jobs to displace, but probably create 150 or 200 million new jobs. And it will impact anywhere between 1 to 2 billion on the long term. That's a third to a half of the working force globally. These are very rough numbers, and again, can be anywhere between this or a magnitude of this. So is there an impact on human capital? Certainly. Now, the interesting thing is that shift and upskilling in that workforce is playing out and is being thought about. And the interesting part is that the youth is participating in driving how that whole upskilling and reskilling is going to happen, because guess what? There are much more educated, experienced, they lived in that digital world that we in our generation did not have that luxury of living. So will the transition be organic? Will it be smooth? We'll see how it plays out. But certainly the workforce is going to evolve. And the businesses, coming back to the investors, the business community, is not waiting to see how things is going to play out to adopt, but actually actively looking at what that means in their own environment. Employees are asking, what does it mean? How do we start to upskill and learn the new skills? And even while asking and waiting for an answer, each individual is actually doing it proactively and jumping on. Sorry for that. Thank you. One, experimenting themselves, understanding a bit what that technology can do for them and their organization, and a lot of very interesting upskilling is coming from within.
Yes, thank you. Now, I'd like to welcome, we're so happy to have you here, Eric Robertson, Global Head of Research and Chief Strategist at Standard Chartered. And I'm just going to bring you in on the discussion now. We've been speaking about AI and the potential scale of human displacement in a number of industries, what that could mean for political stability around the world. But I want to shift back to something I know you focus on, which is deglobalization, de-dollarization, and geopolitics. Now, we are looking at a potential fundamental shift in the so-called world order, both with America's about-face in its relations with its allies, in its trade relations, a potential historic partnership or warming of ties with Russia, between Russia and the US, and at the same time, weaponization of the dollar, which has in part contributed to the expansion of the BRICS alliance. So Eric, I'd like to ask you, from the perspective of an investor, how do you see this affecting markets, affecting dollar dominance, and how does an investor make decisions for the long term and with an eye to markets looking at these massive shifts?
Sure, thank you. The first thing I would say is that, you're absolutely right. We are at a critical moment for both the global economy and for global markets. But I think this has been building over the last 4 or 5 years. I don't think this is a single point in time. So that's number one. Point number two is that I don't really subscribe to the idea of deglobalization. We subscribe to the idea that global trade, global economies are shifting their trade corridors. We're seeing an emergence of emerging to emerging trade, or trade between the global south, which by many estimates is now close to 50% of global trade. So these trade corridors have shifted meaningfully. And for an investor, for anybody who's looking at opportunities on a global scale, on a multi-asset scale, you simply have to shift your focus a little bit to try and understand where the nexus of these opportunities sits. Now, on the dollar and on de-dollarization, I think that theme, if you will, is overplayed. I think it's overstated. If we look at global trade, the dollar is still the dominant currency for invoicing. If you look at a number of examples of trade that is now settled in other currencies, it doesn't replace the dollar, because ultimately the goods and services that are being transacted are done in dollars. So there's a currency transaction which takes place, but we don't necessarily subscribe to the view of de-dollarization. Now, I do want to try and bring in the point on AI that you were alluding to a moment ago, and I think this is critical for all of us. The emergence of AI, the emergence of the digital age, which we're seeing unfold in front of our very eyes, has really important implications for this investment theme that I've just talked about, which it means that people in the global south, in emerging economies trading with each other, have access to the information that they haven't had before. They have access to financial services that they haven't had before. So in some ways, some people talk about it as the democratization of capital markets, the democratization of investment flows. But I think what it really means is that emerging economies, emerging investors now have access to markets, to capital, and to opportunities that they haven't had before.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've only got about 5 minutes left on the clock, and I'd like to ask you all one question, and I'll start with Mark, and we'll go down the line. When you look at the next few years and the way everything that's developing in the global economy, what is the thing that keeps you up at night in terms of major risks facing investments, facing economic stability and the markets?
It boils down to navigating that uncertain world. It's very exciting to be part of that transformation. It's unique in a generation, in multi-generations, but being able to position ourselves, build the partnerships that I mentioned before, and being able to be resilient and tap into opportunities to grow and scale in a purposeful way.
Okay. François? Monsieur Neil?
Yes, it's very difficult not to say that AI will be the most important element to take into account. We fully agree with the fact that we are uncertain about what the transition will be. One remark that I would like to make in connection with this is we have analyzed in a very careful way the process of digitalization that took place over the last 20 years or 30 years, the process of automation, the process of robotization. And what we find is that this didn't have very much impact on employment. Maybe it had an impact on inequality. This is one very important element. But it is certainly the case that it was not the kind of disaster that some people 20 years ago were telling us that the computers would basically erase employment. Will it be the same with AI? It is not clear. I mean, we have pessimist people and we have optimist people. But we have to admit that we don't really know what will be the impact. But I would like to insist on one point, which is if we want jobs to be created, and therefore the employment impact of AI, if there is such an impact, not to be too negative, we need to make sure that the additional income, revenue that will be generated by AI is fairly distributed in the population. And this is a big danger. And this is related to the point that you were doing, Natasha, at the beginning. It is related to the observation that we see an increasing level of inequality with very much of the benefit from AI to be concentrated in the hands of a few people. If this is the case, the change or the increase in demand for many types of goods and services that will be creating jobs due to the AI revolution may not happen simply because this additional benefit will be concentrated in a few hands. We have seen something of this type taking place in the 90s and early 2000s, with a big increase of inequality in many countries, and in particular, big increase in wealth inequality in many countries. And we must be careful in avoiding this to be the case when the AI revolution will become more intensive.
All right, Eric?
Sure. Look, one of the things that we think is going on in the world today is this idea of fragmentation of economies, fragmentation of trade, fragmentation of capital markets. Now, the positive, potentially, is that all that we end up with is a number of what I would call parallel financial ecosystems. Different regions setting up to conduct trade, to conduct investment with each other. You don't necessarily see a disruption of economies and capital markets, but you simply see a shift in the trade flows and the investment flows. But it's really important that we maintain this idea of these parallel ecosystems, because for many of us, we can operate across the different systems. But what keeps me awake at night is that we reach a tipping point. We reach a tipping point where these parallel ecosystems become completely blocked from each other. And the ability to operate across the different systems, whether through currency transactions, trade transactions, or investment flows, becomes completely siloed. And then the cost of doing business goes up, the cost of financial regulation goes up, et cetera. And so I think that risk of tipping into hard fragmentation is real.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, and a big thank you to all of our panelists and to you in the audience and to Investopia for hosting us. That brings us to a close. Thank you for a fantastic discussion.